The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Eleanor flipped through the motel's guestbook, her fingers tracing the faded ink of entries from weeks ago. It was just past midnight, and the lobby felt heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that presses in on you like an uninvited guest. She paused on a name, Robert Klein, checked in on the 15th, but the checkout column sat blank, as if he'd simply vanished into the thin walls of room 13. What struck her wasn't the emptiness, but the date. The same day her old college roommate, long estranged, had mentioned in a postcard she'd received that morning. Coincidence, she told herself, but her hand lingered on the page a second too long. Eleanor had been working the night shift at the Pine Hollow Motel for 6 months now, ever since she'd left the city behind after that messy breakup. The place sat on the edge of a sleepy town in upstate New York, where the highway stretched out like a forgotten promise, flanked by endless pines that whispered in the wind. It wasn't glamorous. 10 rooms, a vending machine that rarely stocked anything but stale chips, and a neon sign that flickered vacancy even on the busiest nights. But it paid the bills, and the isolation suited her. Mornings, she'd drive the 10 miles to the local diner for coffee and eggs, nodding to the same faces, the mechanic with grease-stained hands, the librarian who always carried a dog-eared paperback. Evenings blurred into routines, wiping down the counter, restocking the key hooks, listening to the distant hum of semis on I-87. That night started like any other. The clock above the registration desk ticked toward 1 a.m., and the only sound was the occasional creak of the building settling, or so she thought. Eleanor was midway through her inventory when the phone rang, sharp and insistent. It was Mr. Hargrove, the owner, calling from his home in town to remind her about the audit tomorrow. "Double-check the books, Ellie," he said, his voice gravelly from years of chain-smoking. "Folks have been complaining about discrepancies." She assured him it was fine, hung up, and returned to the Guestbook, a leather-bound relic from the motel's opening in the 70s. Hargrove insisted on keeping it for nostalgia, though most guests signed digitally these days. As she scanned the recent entries, something nagged at her. The name below, Robert Klein, Margaret Voss, checked in on the 20th. No checkout. Voss? That rang a bell. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, heart skipping when she saw it. Aunt Margaret, her mother's sister, who lived down in Florida and hadn't spoken to the family in years. The handwriting matched the fluid cursive on old holiday cards, down to the looped G. Eleanor shook her head, chuckling softly to herself. People reused names all the time. It was a small world, after all, but then she noticed the address listed, 142 Elm Street, the very block where she'd grown up before moving away. The lobby air grew thicker, the kind of stillness that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. She closed the book and stepped outside for a smoke, the gravel crunching under her sneakers. The motel parking lot was empty, save for her beat-up Honda, its headlights long dimmed. Across the road the pines loomed dark and uniform, like silent sentinels. Back inside she tried to shake it off, flipping on the small TV in the corner to drown out the quiet. The local news droned on about a missing hiker up in the Adirondacks, but her mind wandered back to the book. Just to be sure, she reopened it, her eyes darting to the earlier pages. There it was again, a pattern emerging like fog rolling in. Daniel Pierce checked in last month, no out. Pierce was her high school English teacher, the one who'd encouraged her writing dreams before life derailed them. And before him, Laura Hensley, a co-worker from her city job, the barista who'd vanished after a shift one rainy night. Each name tied to her past, scattered like breadcrumbs, leading nowhere. Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she rationalized it. Common names, that's all. In a town like Pine Hollow, with its rotating cast of truckers and tourists, overlaps happened. Still, she couldn't ignore the chill creeping up her spine, the way the room seemed to contract around her. She glanced at the security monitor, its grainy feed showing empty hallways and the rear lot bathed in moonlight. Nothing moved, yet she felt it, a subtle pressure, like eyes on the back of her neck. Was that a shadow shifting in the corner of the frame? No, just the flicker of the bulb. To distract herself, she busied with paperwork, but her thoughts looped back. Why hadn't Hargrove mentioned these? He prided himself on the motel's spotless records. And those postcards, first from her roommate, now this vague sense of echoes from her life resurfacing here in this nowhere place. By 3 a.m., the unease had settled into a low hum. Not panic, but a persistent whisper that something was unraveling. Eleanor locked the guest book in the drawer and poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the pot. As she sipped, staring out at the highway's empty ribbon, a car approached slowly, its headlights cutting through the dark. It pulled into the lot but idled there, engine purring softly. No one emerged. She watched, breath held, until the taillights finally flared and it drove off without stopping. Just a weary driver, she told herself. But in the quiet that followed, the guest book's secrets lingered, pulling at the edges of her reality like threads coming loose. What if those names weren't coincidences? What if they were invitations, waiting for her to sign her own? The rest of the shift dragged on like a half-remembered dream, the clock's hands crawling toward dawn. Eleanor avoided the guest book after that, shoving it deeper into the drawer and turning her attention to the mundane tasks that usually grounded her, straightening the stack of complimentary maps, wiping down the coffee pot for the morning crew. But the names clawed at the edges of her mind, refusing to fade. Robert Klein, Margaret Voss, Daniel Pierce, Laura Hensley, each one a ghost from her past, etched in that outdated ledger as if the motel itself was collecting pieces of her life. She told herself it was exhaustion playing tricks. Night shifts did that, blurring the line between reality and the fog of sleepless hours. Still, every time she glanced at the drawer, her stomach twisted just a little. By 5 a.m., the first hints of grey light filtered through the lobby windows, chasing away the deepest shadows. Eleanor stepped outside again, this time without the cigarette, just to breathe in the crisp air off the pines. The highway was stirring faintly, a lone truck rumbling past, its air brakes hissing like a sigh. She leaned against the motel's peeling siding, the wood cool against her palm, and scanned the lot. Her Honda sat there unchanged. But something felt off about the space, as if the gravel had been rearranged in subtle patterns she couldn't quite make out. Footprints? No, probably just the wind scattering debris from the night before. Pine Hollow mornings were like that, deceptive in their calm, hiding the slow erosion of routine under layers of normalcy. Back inside, she brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the gurgle of the machine a small comfort. As it dripped, she pulled out her phone and texted her friend Sarah from the diner, the one who'd been her sounding board since arriving in town. "Weird night at work. Ever feel like the past is catching up?" She hit send, but the message sat undelivered, the signal bar flickering weakly. Out here on the edge of everything, cell service came and went, like an unreliable neighbor. Eleanor pocketed the phone and poured her cup, the steam rising in lazy curls that mirrored the unease coiling in her chest. The audit Hargrove mentioned loomed larger now, a reminder that tomorrow, or rather, today, she'd have to face those records under his scrutinizing gaze. He was the type who noticed everything, from a missing pen to a guest's lingering stare. Yet he'd said nothing about the blank checkouts. Maybe he hadn't looked closely, or maybe he had, and this was some kind of test. Eleanor shook her head at the thought. Paranoia wasn't her style. She was the practical one, the girl who'd packed up her apartment in Albany on a whim and driven north to start over, leaving behind the noise of city life and the echoes of failed relationships. Pine Hollow was supposed to be a reset, not a riddle. But as she sipped her coffee, a soft knock echoed from the lobby door. 3 deliberate raps that made her jolt. The door was locked as always after hours, and the parking lot was still empty. She set the mug down and approached cautiously, peering through the glass. Nothing but the empty lot and the receding darkness. A branch tapping in the breeze, she reasoned, or perhaps an animal rooting around the dumpster. Yet her skin prickled, that same sensation from earlier, like being watched from just beyond sight. She unlocked the door anyway, stepping out onto the stoop. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine resin, but no movement stirred the shadows. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice swallowed by the quiet. Only silence answered, thick and expectant. Retreating inside, she relocked the door and rubbed her arms against the sudden chill. The TV was still on, muted now, showing a commercial for some upstate real estate. Cozy cabins, nestled in the woods, promising escape. Eleanor turned it off, the screen going black with a faint pop that echoed in the empty space. To steady herself, she decided to check the rooms, a routine patrol she'd skipped earlier in her distraction. Grabbing the master key from its hook, she slipped down the dimly lit hallway, the carpet muffling her steps. Room 1 was vacant, its bed made with military precision by the daytime cleaner. Room 2, same, dust motes dancing in the sliver of light from the window. She paused at room 7, the one with the faulty lock that stuck sometimes. As she jiggled the key, a faint rustle came from inside, like paper shifting on a dresser. Her breath caught, but she pushed the door open. Empty, of course. The room smelled faintly of stale air and lemon cleaner, the curtains drawn tight against the coming dawn. On the nightstand, though, lay a complimentary notepad, flipped open to a blank page. Eleanor frowned. The cleaners always tore off the used sheets. She picked it up, running her finger along the top, indentations from a pen, faint but legible if you held it to the light. "Eleanor?" It read in a hurried scrawl that didn't match any guests she'd seen. Her name, just her name, repeated 3 times, as if someone had been practicing. Heart pounding now, she dropped the pad and backed out, locking the door with trembling hands. It had to be a prank, maybe one of the locals messing around during off hours, but who? The motel wasn't exactly a hotspot for mischief. She returned to the lobby, sinking into the chair behind the desk, and forced herself to breathe deeply. The indentations could be from a previous guest, carried over somehow. Names, echoes. It was all connecting in ways that didn't make sense, yet felt too pointed to dismiss. And that car from earlier, idling like it was waiting for a signal, was someone circling back. The sun crested the horizon then, painting the pines in soft gold, and the first guest of the day pulled in. A family in a minivan, kids rubbing sleep from their eyes. Eleanor plastered on her professional smile, handing over keys to room 9, while chatting about the weather and the best diner in town. Normalcy flooded back, a temporary balm. But as they drove off toward their room, she caught sight of the guestbook drawer again, its pull magnetic. She resisted, busying herself with check-in formalities, but the doubt lingered. What if opening it revealed her own name waiting there, inked fresh and unchecked? The thought burrowed deep, a quiet erosion she couldn't shake, as the day unfolded under the motel's unblinking neon gaze. The morning shift handover came too soon. Or maybe not soon enough. Eleanor couldn't decide as she passed the keys to Carla, the day clerk with her perpetual ponytail and easy laugh. "Quiet night?" Carla asked, flipping through the digital log on the computer. Eleanor nodded, forcing a casual shrug. "Same as always, a few stragglers on the highway, that's it." She didn't mention the guestbook or the notepad. It felt too fragile, like voicing it would make the threads snap. Carla waved her off with a drive safe, and Eleanor slipped out to her Honda, the engine coughing to life under the warming sun. The drive to her apartment was a blur of pine-lined road and radio static, the local station fading in and out with weather updates and ads for the county fair. Her place was a second-floor walk-up in a faded brick building on the edge of Pine Hollow, the kind with creaky stairs and neighbors who kept to themselves. She parked in the lot, gravel crunching like it had at the motel, and climbed the steps, the weight of the night clinging to her like morning dew. Inside, the apartment smelled of yesterday's takeout, Chinese from the place in town that delivered sporadically. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, intending to sleep, but her eyes burned with wakefulness. Instead, she pulled out her phone again, the signal stronger here, but her text to Sarah still undelivered. No matter, she'd call later. For now, she needed answers. Something to ground the swirling thoughts. Opening her laptop on the coffee table, she typed Pine Hollow Motel Guestbook into the search bar, half expecting nothing. A few old reviews popped up, travel blogs praising the clean rooms and cheap rates, a Yelp page with complaints about thin walls, nothing about missing guests or strange names. She delved deeper, searching the individual names. Robert Klein first, a LinkedIn profile for a guy in sales from Syracuse, but no recent activity. Margaret Voss led to an obituary from 5 years back in Florida. Her aunt, the real one, gone from a quiet heart attack. Eleanor's breath hitched. The handwriting in the book had matched, but this was too close. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. Coincidences stacked like this didn't happen. Or did they? Pine Hollow drew all sorts, drifters passing through on their way to bigger places, folks escaping something back home. Maybe these were echoes, people with the same names rebuilding lives in the shadows of upstate obscurity. But the address for Margaret, 142 Elm Street, that was hers, from childhood. No one here knew that detail unless they dug, and why would they? The thought twisted into something sharper. Surveillance, not the overt kind, with cameras in the pines, but subtle, like the motel itself was listening. Sleep finally claimed her around noon, fitful and laced with dreams of endless hallways, doors numbered 13, repeating into infinity, each one opening to faces from her past mouthing silent words. She woke to the slanting light of late afternoon, disoriented and parched. The apartment felt smaller, the walls pressing in with their peeling wallpaper and the faint hum of the fridge. She made coffee, strong and black, and paced the kitchenette, replaying the night's fragments. The idling car, had it been a familiar make. Her ex's old Ford, maybe, circling like unresolved baggage. No, that was the city talking, projecting old hurts onto this quiet town. By evening, the pull to return to the motel was magnetic. Hargrove's audit be damned. She showered, changed into fresh jeans and a hoodie, and headed out as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples. The highway traffic picked up with the evening rush, commuters from Albany trickling north, but her mind stayed fixed on the neon sign ahead. Pulling into the lot, she noted the family from morning had checked out, their minivan gone, leaving tire tracks in the gravel. The lobby light glowed welcomingly, but as she entered, Carla glanced up from the desk with a raised eyebrow. "Back already? Thought you had the night off." Eleanor hesitated, then smiled. Forgot some paperwork. Hargrove's audit, wanted to prep. It was a thin excuse, but Carla bought it, nodding as she gathered her things. "See you tomorrow, then. Place gives me the creeps after dark, anyway." Alone again, the lobby wrapped around her like an old coat, familiar yet altered. She beelined for the drawer, pulling out the guestbook, with hands steadier than she felt. Flipping to the recent pages, her eyes scanned for new entries. Nothing since the family, but the old names stared back, accusatory in their incompleteness. She sat at the desk, the chair creaking under her, and began cross-referencing on her phone. Daniel Pierce, her teacher, now retired in Vermont according to a faculty page. Laura Hensley, the barista, last seen in a missing persons forum post from 2 years ago, unsolved. Each connection deepened the knot in her stomach, a slow unraveling of certainty. Was the motel a magnet for lost souls? Or was she the common thread, her past bleeding into the present through some inexplicable pull? The security monitor flickered, showing the empty lot, but now the shadows seemed longer, pooling at the edges like ink. A soft chime from the bell above the door jolted her. Another guest? But the clock read 7 p.m. Early for night wanderers. No one entered. It was just the wind nudging the frame. Or was it? She stood, peering out, the highway a ribbon of headlights in the distance. That's when she noticed the new car parked at the far end of the lot, partially obscured by the vending machine, a sedan, nondescript, engine off, no plates visible from here. Her pulse quickened, that watched feeling returning tenfold. She grabbed the master key again, deciding on another patrol, this time with purpose. The hallway lights buzzed faintly as she moved room to room. Listening at doors, testing locks. Room 13 at the end felt coldest, its number plate slightly askew. She inserted the key, turning it slowly, the click echoing. Inside, the air was stale, untouched since the last vacancy. The bed was made, the curtains parted to reveal the dark pines beyond. But on the dresser, where a Bible usually sat, was the guestbook, her guestbook, from the lobby. Open to a fresh page, a pen resting beside it. Eleanor's mouth went dry. She hadn't brought it here, no one had. Approaching cautiously, she saw the entry. Eleanor Grant, checked in tonight. No checkout. Her handwriting, or a perfect mimic, the looped G, the precise slant. She touched the ink, still damp. A laugh bubbled up, nervous and disbelieving. A joke, had to be. Carla, maybe. Or Hargrove, testing her for the audit. But the room door had been locked and the book was heavy in her hands, its weight pulling at something deeper. She slammed it shut, heart hammering, and hurried back to the lobby, locking the drawer with a finality that did little to ease the tremor in her fingers. Outside, the sedan remained, its silhouette unmoving against the twilight. Eleanor watched from the window, the neon vacancy sign reflecting in the glass like a distorted mirror. The isolation hit then, full force. This town, this motel, her life here, suddenly a web of unseen strings. Who was writing her story in those pages? And why did it feel like the next entry was already forming, waiting for the ink to dry? The night stretched ahead, vast and whispering. As the first stars pierced the sky over Pine Hollow, Eleanor stood frozen in the lobby, the guestbook's weight still echoing in her palms even after shoving it back into the drawer. The lock clicked shut, but it felt meaningless, like sealing a door against fog. Her eyes darted to the window, where the sedan idled at the lot's edge, its outline blurring into the deepening dusk. No driver visible. Just the faint glow of dashboard lights flickering like a distant signal. She rubbed her arms, the hoodie doing little against the chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Pine Hollow nights cooled quickly, the pines swallowing the last of the day's warmth, but this was different, a seep from within. She paced behind the desk, the linoleum cool under her socks. She'd kicked off her sneakers earlier, a small act of comfort now turned vulnerability. The clock ticked past 7:30, each second stretching the quiet into something elastic. Hargrove would be by soon for the audit, his pickup rumbling in from town like clockwork. What would she say? The names, the notepad, the book in room 13, it all swirled in her head, a pattern too neat for chance. Her past wasn't just echoing. It was rewriting itself here, in this forgotten corner of upstate New York, as if the motel had been waiting for her to arrive and complete the collection. To ground herself, she busied with the coffee pot, refilling it from the sink's trickle of water. The gurgle filled the space, a mechanical heartbeat against the silence. As it brewed, she glanced at the security monitor again. The feed from the rear camera caught the sedan's taillights flaring briefly. No movement, but the angle shifted, or seemed to, catching a shadow detaching from the pines across the road. Just a deer, probably, foraging in the underbrush. Deer were common here, their eyes catching headlights like accusations. Still, she turned away, unwilling to stare too long. The front doorbell chimed again, sharper this time, and Eleanor's head snapped up. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside, deliberate and unhurried. She smoothed her hoodie, forcing the professional mask back on as the door swung open. It was Hargrove earlier than expected, his flannel shirt rumpled and a thermos in hand. "Ellie," he grunted, setting the thermos on the counter with a thud. "Ready for this? Books don't lie, but people do." His eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the lobby as if appraising more than ledgers. She nodded, throat tight. "All set. Digital logs are up to date." He pulled out a stool and gestured for her to join, flipping open his notebook. They started with the basics. Occupancy rates, maintenance notes, but Eleanor's mind lagged, snagging on the drawer. As Hargrove droned about utility bills, she stole glances at him, searching for tells. Did he know? The way his pen scratched the paper reminded her of the notepad's indentations, the looped G in her name. Coincidence, always coincidence, but the word lost its comfort, turning brittle. Half an hour in, he paused, tapping the Guestbook's drawer. "This old thing, you been keeping it tidy?" She murmured agreement, heart thudding as he slid it open. The book lay there innocent in the dim light, but when he flipped it to the recent pages, his brow furrowed. "These blanks. Klein, Voss. Didn't notice them before." He traced a finger down the column, voice dropping. "Folks check out, Ellie. They always do." No accusation, just a statement hanging in the air like smoke. She watched his face, the lines deepening around his mouth, and wondered if he saw the connections, the ties to her life woven in faded ink. Hargrove closed the book slowly, his gaze lingering on her. "You look peaked. Rough night?" She shrugged it off, blaming the shift, but he leaned closer, voice low. "This place. It holds on to things. Stories from the road, people passing through, sometimes they stick." His words landed soft, but they stirred the unease like stirring silt in still water. Did he mean the names, or something more? He stood then, clapping her shoulder, a rare gesture that felt paternal, almost apologetic. "Finish up. I'll check the rooms tomorrow." As he headed out, his pickup's engine growled to life, taillights fading down the highway. Alone again, the lobby expanded, walls receding into shadow. Eleanor waited a beat, then retrieved the book, flipping past the known names to the end. Her entry stared back. Eleanor Grant, checked in tonight. But below it, in fresh ink, another line. Eleanor Grant, checked in again. The date was today's. Time stamped just minutes ago. Her breath fogged the page. She hadn't written it. The pen from room 13 lay beside the book in the drawer, cap off, as if recently used. A tremor ran through her fingers as she touched the page. The ink smeared slightly, warm. The realization crept in, not as a crash, but a slow tilt, like the world shifting on its axis. This wasn't a prank or a glitch. It was a mirror, reflecting her unraveling. The motel wasn't collecting ghosts from her past. It was her, imprinting them here, the isolation of Pine Hollow, amplifying fragments of memory into something tangible, inescapable. The names weren't vanishings. They were arrivals, pieces of herself she'd left behind in Albany, in Florida visits, in high school hallways, and now her own name repeating, as if the building refused to let her check out, trapping her in its quiet loop. She slammed the book shut, pulse roaring in her ears, and grabbed her keys. The sedan was gone from the lot, vanished like a thought, but the pines rustled with unseen movement. Outside, the air bit colder, the highway a black vein pulsing with distant traffic. Eleanor slid into her Honda, engine turning over with a reluctant whine. As she pulled onto the road, the neon vacancy sign flickered in the rear view, its glow stretching long behind her. She drove toward town, toward the diner's lights and Sarah's unanswered texts, but the pull lingered, a whisper that tomorrow's shift would bring the book open again, her name waiting, ink drying under the fluorescent buzz. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent as Pine Hollow receded, but in the quiet of the car, Eleanor felt it. The past wasn't catching up. It had always been here, in the motel's pages, and now she was part of the entry that never ended.